Welcome to Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast. We're here with Graham Boyd, who's an expert in regenerative practice. Is it hopeless?
And then the other piece that occurs to me when you were talking about an outside facilitator coming in is we often look for someone to hand us the answers, but none of this can be handed to anyone. That's part one. And part two is you've created a business around facilitating, but process work, deep process work, isn't valued at the level it should be valued in the industry. How have you personally struggled with that, and what have you found that to help you keep going in this work? Because I'm assuming it has been a struggle, and that's a grand assumption on my part.
Yes, it's definitely been a struggle, and it still is a struggle. Mm-hmm. There are many days where I do struggle. There are many things I want to now put in response to what you've been saying. I'll put in one thing that I'd like to bring in. So there are a growing number of people who over the past 2 to 3 years have woken up to just how serious the climate catastrophe is. Mm-hmm. And who have gone from this is nothing to worry about straight through to it's hopeless, we're doomed, without passing go in between and without collecting $200 as they go around the board. And, in the early 2000s, I was already starting to say to myself, is it hopeless? Mm. And one of the things that keeps me going is what I was saying a moment ago about the unknowable part. By simply recognizing that there is much that is from where we are today unknowable, that is at least something that keeps me going despite all of the setbacks, is that sense of we cannot know. We cannot say for certainty that the planet for humanity is doomed. Mm-hmm. There is always some surprise that may pop up around the corner when we get to the corner where we realize, oh, this, as Don Beck says, what is it that I don't know that I don't know, mm-hmm. where once I know it will change everything? And
now for some, does that create an inaction? Because that's what concerns me. Oh, I probably shouldn't have asked that question so quickly, but I feel like I've encountered situations where that lack of knowledge has made people sit and wait, as opposed to saying, I will do all that is in my power in this moment, trusting that the next moment will just give me more information that I can then act on.
Yes. There are definitely some people for whom that paralyzes them, not knowing. For me, that's exactly what gives me hope.
Yeah.
I don't know, and therefore, something may emerge that gives me hope.
An unexpected superpower.
One of my superpowers is depression. So
okay.
I first started experiencing depression in my early teens. And it's an aspect of myself that it's never really left me. I still have depressed episodes. Now, I say it's a superpower because having spent most of my life working with a deep sense of despair that is coming from inside me and still keeping going, I'm far better practiced at staying in action in the middle of a felt sense of despair than most other people are. Wow. So in a sense, for me, the despair that comes from our current climate situation is just an additional source for despair. It's not a complete change in my internal situation.
That's actually, I love that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That perspective is incredible, because I think we have a tendency, at least in the society in the USA, to relegate people who are struggling with anything to a lesser, when in fact you've illustrated that it's an aspect of resilience and strength that we can all learn from.
Mm-hmm.
How incredible.
Yes.
You just reframed something that I wasn't even aware needed reframing in my head. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Only a pleasure.
Optimism in uncertainty.
Well, in multiple things. So, I mean, there was that. I love this idea of, using uncertainty too as a reason to be optimistic. And it's so funny that, you tied this conversation, funny, not funny, but it's interesting to me because not 10 minutes ago, I was watching you speak and be so animated and this huge smile, and you're truly passionate. I was like, oh my God, I don't think that there's a happier man in the whole world. And so, but to me, it kind of makes sense. It almost makes it make more sense that you could have these bouts of depression and be facing some of the same challenges, but you have this resiliency and therefore this kind of optimism, I think, that continues.
And
how
cultivated.
do you practice that?
I do definitely practice that. One of some of the patterns that we've developed in what we call our adaptive way, which is, let's say, it's a language for dialogue in organizations and within oneself, so that the tensions, the stresses that emerge in work become part of one's developmental journey.
The pattern of a rising phoenix.
Yeah, and one of the patterns which I find very helpful, we call it rising phoenix, which is whenever something has happened that I'm judging as bad, is to ask myself, what good can I imagine might emerge out of this bad thing? And then the advanced version, if I can't imagine anything good coming out of it, is to then say to myself, and do I at least accept that my imagination is limited versus everything that can happen in the future?
Wow.
Just because I can't imagine something good coming out of it doesn't mean nothing good can come out of it.
That requires you and requires us to actually recognize that our ego cannot dominate the moment we're in. We are part of what's going on, but not all of what's going on.
Yes.
And I think that's another thing that ties in with holacracy and facilitation and process work and practice. Lauren, you use the term practice, and we always talk about yoga being a practice and regenerative practice being a practice, because we know that it's the process and the journey that matters. And there's also no end point. It will always be a practice because time continues and our abilities change. This fascinates me. In a world that wants answers, this way of thinking is often a struggle for people to engage with.
Perfect.
Excellent. And we will be getting your book.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Beautiful.
And probably swimming backwards, because that sounds fascinating as well.
It does. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
It is. It's a fascinating book. I've loved it. Thank you, the two of you. This has been an absolute delight, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Yes.
Thank you
Definitely
so
need a
much,
next
Graham.
conversation.
Have a
Beautiful.
great rest of your day.